Thank you for joining us for the Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. I'm Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, a volunteer host for the Miami Valley Communications Council. My husband was killed in Vietnam in 1969. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Being around our veterans and talking with them, hearing their stories and their thoughts, is my way of honoring my husband's legacy. We hope that hearing these memories from veterans of our community will help us all better understand the dedication of those who have served. Today we're talking with Jason G. Riley of Washington Township, an Army veteran who served from 1995 to 2020. He will tell us the story of his time in the military. Thank you for being with us today,
thanks.
Jason.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
Okay. When you went into the military, why did you go into the military and why did you choose the Army?
Okay. So I grew up, I was born in Kent, Ohio. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was born in Akron. We lived in Kent. So Northeast Ohio, it was home. Youngest of 8. My parents, my dad was a manager of a factory. My mom was a nursing assistant in a nursing home. Made too much money to get any financial aid to go to college. Not enough to pay for a kid to go to college. So I applied for any and all scholarships, and I ended up receiving a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship. And I'll be honest, I was drawn to the Army more just because didn't want to be in the Navy. I don't mind swimming, but I didn't want to be on a ship somewhere. Again, because you have your frame of reference of what you think the service is if you've never been, right? So everyone in the Navy's on a ship, and we know that's not true. Everyone in the Army somehow is in a tank or is an infantry. That's not true. Air Force wasn't quite as interesting in the Marine Corps. My dad was a Spec 5 during the Vietnam conflict, and my older brother is a retired Special Forces Master Sergeant. So the Army was more interesting to me, but honestly, it was a means to an end. It was a way to pay for college, and going into it, it was, I'm going to do 4 years of active duty. I did an 8-year commitment, and then after that was done, I was going to do 4 years in the reserve or guard, and then I ended up doing 25.
Whoops.
Yeah.
When you went in, what occupational specialty were you given?
Well, when you go through, and this is that time, I'm not entirely sure how it is now, but for Army ROTC, when you're requesting either to go on active duty or in the reserves. So I wanted an active duty commission. It still would have been a reserve commission. There's some technical stuff with that, but your dream sheet is you list your branches. And as a male, you had to have a combat arms, think infantry, armor, artillery, one in your top 3 and 2 in your top 6. So mine branch choices were military intelligence, adjutant general corps, which is personnel, artillery. I remember those were my top 3. I ended up getting branched, assessed, active duty, adjutant general corps. But the adjutant general corps and a few other branches, they're not traditional pyramids of structure. They don't have a lot of lieutenant requirements. So they loan those lieutenants out to combat arms branches who need a lot of lieutenants, platoon leaders out there. So it's a win-win. The branch that's not combat arms gets officers then with that experience. So I was branched AG, but branch detailed to the field artillery. So I went to the field artillery basic course and did 4 years as a field artillery officer. Then my detail ended, and I was at that point had decided I was going to stay on active duty longer, and then switched over to be an adjutant general corps officer. Wow. So good program. I mean, so I did. I always say I got my number 2 and my number 3 choice. So
that's great. Where did you go for your basic training?
So field artillery officer basic course is at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And then after that, my first duty assignment was Fort Drum, New York.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. What did you think about basic training? I mean, you were in ROTC, and is that when you took it?
So once you complete ROTC, once you graduate and receive your commission, then they'll send you off to your basic course. I was quite nervous. I'm a political science major. Artillery, there's a lot of what we call manual gunnery. It's not just the computer. And
sure.
A couple of the guys that had graduated the semester before had struggled. And I'm like, I took one algebra class in college just to get it out of the way. I didn't have any more math requirements, and now I'm going to head off to a place where I'm doing some geometry. And so I was quite scared, to be honest with you. But it ended up working out. I was one of the distinguished graduates, so I enjoyed it. It was a nice transition because, you know, in ROTC, you're not doing this full time. You're wearing a uniform once a week, maybe. Yeah. But when you get towards graduation, you're like, okay, this is going to be real now. I'm going to have to start focusing on what next is going to be.
Wow.
So yeah, packed up everything in my car and drove the 14 hours to Tulsa, and then the last few hours to Lawton, Oklahoma, and spent about 6 months there for school, and then headed up to Fort Drum after that.
And you drove?
Yeah. Back when I could fit everything I owned in a Jeep Cherokee Sport.
That's great. What was the best part of your training? What did you really like about it?
The challenge. I mean, because it's not like anything you can really compare it to. I mean, maybe to an experience of somebody going through an academy to be an emergency services first responder type thing. Mm-hmm. But what you like about it, just like any team, you have a common purpose and a common goal. And so I met a lot of good, other people. And it's funny, I look back, I have a photo of my platoon. I don't stay in contact with them. It's a little harder because back then there was no social media. There's no way other than, and when you're moving around, how do you stay in contact with people when, unless they send you a letter that says what their new phone number is. But many did not stay after their initial commitment. I looked at that photo once and I think only 2 or 3 of us out of 30 ended up staying mm-hmm. for the long haul, which is typical. I mean, I think the retirement percentage is like maybe 10%. The opportunity, whether it was at the basic training or throughout my career, to interact with people that you would have if you'd stayed a normal career path, mm-hmm. To serve alongside someone who grew up in Compton, who's no kidding would tell you stories that they had a few options growing up. It was either join a gang, potentially get killed, go to jail. So the military was their way of getting out of that cycle. Mm-hmm. And it is, for all its faults, a truly meritorious based organization. You work hard, you put in, and those with the potential will continue to bubble up and get more opportunities. I don't think many businesses can say that.
No. What was the worst part?
Wow.
Just of the training.
Yeah, the training side. I don't know. I actually enjoyed all of it.
I've heard that a lot.
You know, it's physically demanding. It was academically demanding. I mean, I think it's really not the worst part. You wanted, but you wanted it to be over quick because you wanted to get to your unit. I mean, mm-hmm. School's great and that provides you that foundation, but you're like, you didn't come in to be at school. You want to move on and get to your unit and be a platoon leader and do all those things that lieutenants get to do.
Does any instructor stand out in your?
No, not really. I mean, because officers in particular move around more than the enlisted population does, you get to see a pretty broad image of different leadership styles. And we had instructors who were very kind of easygoing, comical, and others who were very no emotion, very strict. But I actually appreciate that because then it forces you to learn how to adapt and interact with people with maybe a style or approach or personality that doesn't align with yours. I mean, the only funny story was we were out on a little place called Survey Hill, and one of the things we would do is you have equipment kind of like a surveyor would have, because you have to be able to mark an exact point of where the howitzers are going to go to fire. Mm-hmm. And we had these little camp stools that we could sit on while we would write down information. Well, I couldn't see very well through the lens, and I ended up putting my glasses down for a second onto my seat. And I didn't realize my instructor came over after me and then sat down on my seat. And yeah, glasses were gone. And he was very apologetic. I mean, it was an accident, right? But when it was looking back, I was like, wow. And I was like, can I skip this part? Because now I can't see very well.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So you qualified with equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of?
So that course trains you to go out and become either a platoon leader. And at that time, we had 3 or 4 different artillery platforms. So there was a 105 millimeter howitzer that would get pulled by a Humvee. So that was the smallest one.
Yeah.
There was something called an M198, which is a 155 millimeter howitzer, had to be towed by a big truck, like a 2.5 ton to a 5 ton truck.
Okay.
Then we had 109 Paladin howitzers, which were self-propelled. People sometimes think they're tanks, but they're not. It's a self-propelled howitzer.
Okay.
And then there was the multiple MLRS, multiple launch rocket system. So those were the 4 artillery platforms that they would train you to do to be a platoon leader of those types of units. But then you also had what we call a fire direction officer, who would send data to the towed guns on how to fire, because they're not computer operated, they're manually operated. So elevation, the size of the charge, all that was done by a fire control center. And then something called a fire support officer. So a fire support officer and their team would be attached to an infantry company. So they'd be the ones calling in for artillery.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the 3 types of jobs that the artillery lieutenant would do. So that's what they would cover with you, in addition to additional duties of supply and maintenance. But primarily it was to teach you to do a platoon leader, a fire direction officer, or a fire support officer role. So I was able to do two of those, fire direction officer and fire support officer, before my detail ended.
But you learned how to fire those?
Yeah. What's interesting, and again, what I appreciate about our basic courses for the Army, and I'm sure it is for the other services as well, you have to learn how to do each one of your soldiers' jobs.
Okay.
So when we would go out to the field and fire towed howitzer, there wasn't a crew of enlisted there. We were the crew, right? You had to do everyone's job, and you rotated throughout the exercise.
That makes so much sense.
It is. Not all branches
Yeah.
teach their officers to do their enlisted jobs first.
Mm-hmm.
But it is important.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Okay. What was your first assignment after training?
Yeah. So I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division Artillery at Fort Drum, New York, as the reconnaissance and surveying officer for the battalion. A job that I didn't expect to get, because I, again, was hoping to be a fire support officer or a fire direction officer or platoon leader. So I had the survey section, which would go out and mark points. And I also was in charge of the radar team.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a small little, what they call a Q-36 radar. So I was in charge of those. I honestly wasn't happy about it, because I knew my time in the artillery was limited. I wanted to maximize it. I'd gotten my first duty station of choice, Fort Drum, because in the early 90s, 10th Mountain Division did Somalia and was in Haiti. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to go to a unit that's deploying.
Mm-hmm.
And where did I go the 4 years? To West Point, New York, and train cadets one summer. That was the extent of my Fort Drum deployment. So,
oh my gosh.
But I enjoyed that job. And then after a few months, I transitioned to be a fire support officer for a few months, and then became the headquarters battery executive officer, which I did for a really long time. But it was good. And at that point, it was starting to getting close to where my detail was going to end anyways. And they gave me command of the big radar detachment, so big 2 Q-37 radars. So I got to command equivalent of a company command as a first lieutenant. It was a job everybody wanted.
And you got it.
Yeah, and I was told at the basic course they do a session where captains going to their advanced course, same location.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to where they came from, they wanted to talk to you and say, hey, this is what it's like up there at that unit. And they said, don't tell anyone your branch detailed, because they'll just make you the personnel officer for the battalion. You won't get any artillery experience.
Oh my gosh.
And but word had gotten out by then. I mean, you can't keep that kind of secret for 4 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And it helped me get that command because everyone wanted it, but they still needed line time that was competing for it. And I didn't, because I wasn't going to stay in this branch. And so I got to command as a first lieutenant. It was great. I had a detachment of about 30, but I managed my own budget, own maintenance program, really good experience at that point in my career.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
If you're just joining us, this is Miami Valley Communications Council Salute to Veterans podcast. I'm your host, Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, and today we're talking with Jason Riley, a veteran of the Army. Okay, let us continue.
Okay.
You were in a long time. Tell me, let's go over, you went and you did that, and were you still in New York for that last command?
Yeah, so I did 3 years. Let's see, so I got there in 96. So commissioned in 95. There was a delay to get to your basic course, so I was a gold bar recruiter at the Army ROTC.
Which is?
So you don't immediately graduate and go straight to school. It depends on how quickly they fill up the classes.
Oh.
So I had a 5-month gap where you'd be commissioned, but you wouldn't be getting paid because you're not technically on active duty yet. So I volunteered and was picked up to be the gold bar recruiter for Army ROTC at the University of Akron. So I came on active duty to assist the recruiting officer, which is a win, right? Because now I'm a recent graduate. I'm still close enough in age to high school students to talk to them about my college experience in ROTC. So it helped. I could start earning some money.
Yeah.
Then. So I went to the basic course in October of 95, graduated around April, and then got the summer of 96, and then left Fort Drum in 99 to South Korea.
I see.
And then did 2 years in South Korea.
What did you do there?
So my detail had ended, so I was personnel officer at that point.
Okay.
So I commanded the first replacement company in Korea. So everybody Army-wise that comes into Korea as an individual came to my company.
Mm-hmm.
You could be there less than 24 hours. We'd receive you at either Osan Air Base or at the time at Kimpo Airport. Incheon was built afterwards. We'd receive you, put you into the theater database, and then the assignment managers at my higher headquarters at 8th Personnel Command would make the assignments.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for a year and then went over to the Personnel Battalion to be the operations officer for my second year.
Still in Korea?
Still in Korea, yeah. Didn't get the same Korean experience that most people do. My wife was able to go with me. It was a command sponsor.
Wow.
Lived in Seoul, me and my, 13 million neighbors. And she worked at the area support group in their public affairs office. So we didn't get the standard Korean experience.
No.
Anytime I went up north to the 2nd Infantry Division, those units that were on the border, you'd have to have a pass to come south, and they'd be looking for my pass, and I'd show them my patch and say, I'm not, sorry, I don't need a pass. I actually can roam around the country like Southwest Airlines.
Oh my gosh.
So it was good, but it was, a kid from rural northern Ohio to my first experience in another country.
What did your parents think about all this?
Supportive, a little hesitant, maybe concerned, like I think any parent. Not just the type of work you do is inherently dangerous, even no matter what your specialty can be, and just going away. But again, what a great opportunity.
Oh yeah.
To not interact with a diverse group of fellow service members, but now with a different culture. Really enjoyed Korea. You get a little homesick, but with just a great culture, I mean, I'd love to get back there. Still have friends there.
Really?
Yeah, so it was very grateful for that opportunity.
Quite an experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you go anywhere else overseas?
I commanded a brigade in Germany
Mm-hmm.
for 2 years in support of NATO. So I had people.
And did your wife go with you?
Yes, yeah,
Cool.
and my daughter. My daughter's 20 now, but old enough. She was a high school student, old enough to appreciate living in Europe, and we got to travel on our own time. I was on the road quite a bit just for work, because again, I had 20 different countries. I had people in 37 different locations. So
Oh my gosh.
I was traveling quite a bit, and but again, what a great opportunity, right?
You got to see all of Europe.
Yeah, I did. And again, so getting back to a little bit of the gratitude piece. So here I am, kid who took the RTC scholarship as a way to get to school and graduate. So the U.S. government, the taxpayer, paid for my bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree from Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. I have a master's degree from the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. And my daughter is going to Miami University right now on my GI Bill.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so when people talk about the cost of, kids coming out of school with massive debt,
Oh, yeah.
there are options out there for people if they're willing to raise their right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I didn't come out with any school debt. I got more degrees on top of it. And then the experiences, right? So, and then I spent a year in Qatar, and then deployments to Afghanistan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You want to tell me about Afghanistan?
Yeah. So I kind of like to call it like a 2.5 deployment, because when I was in Qatar, I was based out of Qatar, but for the first half, I was supporting U.S. Forces Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go in regularly, fly in, as well as fly up to Kuwait. But my first deployment, I was the personnel officer, what we call the S1 of a airborne brigade combat team out of the 82nd.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished up the last part of their 15-month deployment. It was originally 12, and they got extended to 15. So I met up with them because I was coming out of a military school. So I went forward for the last 3 months of that, and then stayed in the unit, and we deployed the next year, and then did 12 months. So the first time it was in FOB Salerno, south of Bagram,
Mm-hmm.
right along the Pakistan border. And then the second time I was based out of Kandahar, down the southern area.
We've all heard those names.
Yes, yeah. And our brigade that second time we were dispersed massively. We were taking over a more of an advise, train, and assist mission. So our whole brigade was scattered from Herat up in the northwest along the Iranian border all the way down into Kandahar, and kind of embedded with the Afghan units
Mm-hmm.
to help coach, teach, mentor them to improve their capabilities and capacity. So both times we lost. I mean, as the personnel guy, I was the one verifying every casualty report. Yeah. So we lost both fatalities and just injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few in both deployments. Afghanistan, I didn't do a tour in Iraq, so but the comparisons, while IEDs were prevalent in Afghanistan, the road network wasn't the greatest. So rockets were frequent, and we didn't really have a lot of good countermeasures the first deployment against rockets. When I went back later deployments, had something called a CRAM, which was a Navy ship-mounted Gatling gun. Somebody decided, hey, it can track incoming missiles. Why don't we use it to shoot down rockets? So later times that I was back in 2015 to 16, when I was in Afghanistan, the CRAMs were up at Bagram shooting down rockets. So it was a pretty good defense and deterrent mechanism. But early on, this first deployment was rockets, and then the tour in Kandahar, because we were so spread out. Again, some of it was small arms fire engagements. One of our battalions in particular, there's a region north of Kandahar called the Arghandab River Valley. And it's not the desert that most people associate with Southwest Kandahar. It's more lush greenery, and a lot of similarities, I believe, to Vietnam as far as troops had to dismount, which is why they moved us in as an airborne brigade. We don't have a lot of vehicles. But the injuries and the fatalities we were seeing there were stepping on landmines, personnel mines versus the big ones that would go after the heavier vehicles. Plus, if you can take bright spots out of it, is the military had come so far from past conflicts of having that golden hour, the ability with medevac to treat with anticoagulants and tourniquets and more expertise at the point of injury. We're able to save more than we would have. There was an amputation or something that would go along with it, but in previous conflicts, that person probably wouldn't have survived. And then just the amazing things that we've done since in the way of prosthetics to help improve somebody's quality of life.
Yes.
Coming out of it. So, so we had a lot of amputations, either from anti-personnel or even the IED mines, IEDs that went off, gunners, people, it's going to hit your lower extremities. So, and I think, for me, as the personnel guy who spent most of my time on a very large base and, the occasional rocket that would disrupt your day. But I was, a field grade officer, so a major or above would have to verify casualty reports before they went to the Department of the Army. And the only thing that stuck with me a lot and weighed with me is every time I read a casualty report, and I'd also have access to their insurance documents and all this stuff. I'd learn more about their family, and there was this intense guilt of, I know this information now, and they're back in the States probably sleeping, and like they need to know before me. I mean, I have this information, which is terrible. The guilt of knowing that, and they don't.
Right.
It was a weird sensation or feeling every time we got a casualty report, and it definitely hit home when it was somebody I knew too. So it was the nature of the conflict that we were dealing with. Counterinsurgency is a lot different than doing a force on force. Hide within the population. You can't, they're wearing a uniform that you can see. So I was glad when that deployment was over, we came back, and then I moved on to another U.S. Army Special Operations Command after that for a couple of years.
Where was that then?
That was still at what's now Fort Liberty, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And then got promoted to lieutenant colonel there, and then came back to the 82nd as the assistant chief of staff for personnel, the G1. Did my 2 years in that job, and then went off to the Army War College. So, my last time with Airborne Special Operations was I left in 2014 and ended up retiring in 2020. But, and I've got some of the wear and tear from my time in airborne units. My back isn't so great these days. Like this theme of being grateful. I am. I mean, it is a tough life in the military, and I'm, can't make any apologies for it. It's the nature of service.
Absolutely.
So, when people ask, I'm like, I do it all over again. I mean, it is, I enjoyed my time and meeting just interesting people along the way, whether they're in our military or another military, lifelong friendships that have developed out of that. You can't put a price on that.
Tell me, do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events in your time in the military?
There's a funny story, actually one I'm a little bit proud of. So there were 2 artillery battalions at Fort Drum, New York. So I was assigned to one. Other classmates of mine from the basic course went to the other battalion. You didn't get a choice. You got assigned, and they further assigned you down. Our battalion had an inert 105 round, so it's a dummy round.
Okay.
And at the first hail and farewell, you do one every month. You would hail new people coming to the unit, you'd farewell those who were leaving. So the newest lieutenant took that round from the previous owner. So you hope that each month there was someone else coming in. If not, you'd be the keeper of the round for a longer time, and you had to take it pretty much everywhere you went. When you gave it up, you had to put something on it, an adornment, a pin or something. You dare not leave that thing unattended.
Really?
Because you didn't want to be the one that lost it. There were stories that in the past that the lieutenant had misplaced it, and then people were sending that lieutenant ransom notes with pictures of it at different places. So where I lived in a place called Madison Barracks out along Lake Ontario, a bunch of lieutenants, we all lived out there. My next door neighbor, who was a classmate of my basic course, he was in the other battalion. They had a Black Panther statue, but it was big enough or small enough you could hold. That was their equivalent of the round. So here I am. I've got the round in my apartment. He's got the Panther in his. And we went out to socialize one evening, and here we are carrying these items into the bar. Then we went back to somebody's place, and long story short, my buddy Rob lost his Panther.
Oh, no.
Because this guy stole it from him. So I had both for a period of time. He didn't know I had it. He was freaking out because he didn't want to have to tell the battalion commander he'd lost it. So we let that go on for a few days. And I joked with him that we were going to paint the Panther pink or put a big pacifier in its, mouth just to. But I got some credit for doing that from the other lieutenants in the Lieutenant Mafia. So that was kind of fun.
I love that. I love that. What was the best part of well, you've told me, I think, the best part of your experience in the military has been...
The people. I mean, just and I'm not trying to say it's bad, but if you grow up and live in the same community and you don't force yourself to get out of that bubble, mm-hmm. you're missing out. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who's a brigadier general in the Botswana Defense Force. When would I have ever come across him?
Never.
No, not if I'd stayed the course that many of my high school classmates did. Mm-hmm. And I'm better for it. And those who have been in the military for a long period of time, I think we have a greater appreciation for the world at large and the complex problems that exist out there, and not just, I'm fortunate to have been born and raised in this country, but also a sense of feeling an obligation and responsibility to be a true leader for the rest of the world, and not just because we have the strongest military. No, that's not it. Right. It's almost like to the Marvel fans out there when Uncle Ben tells Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that. And it's not, responsibility to take care of ourselves. We have a responsibility to set the example for the rest of the world, mm-hmm. Both by what we say and what we do. And so, I mean, just extremely grateful that I chose the path I did. I mean, when I replay it, right, if I hadn't taken the Army ROTC scholarship, I wouldn't have probably gone to the University of Akron. I wouldn't have met my wife there. We wouldn't have our daughter. Mm-hmm. And all the people that go down the line that I've come across, interacted with, I would not have met them. So, I'm just very grateful and thankful for that opportunity.
When your service ended, what did you have something lined up or?
No, I mean my exit. I felt like, those really short exit ramps off of a fast moving expressway. Having lived in Germany, driving down the Autobahn at 100 miles an hour is a normal cruising speed, and all of a sudden having to get off. That's what it felt like. I was diagnosed with a condition called retinitis pigmentosa as I was completing the Army War College in 2015. Mm. And I was already coming up on promotion to colonel. I'd already been selected for brigade command 2 years out, they had to do something with me for a year after school, which is why they sent me to Qatar for a year to run a program for the SecDef, Secretary of Defense, sorry. And it runs in my family. Didn't realize it till my dad was diagnosed in his early 60s. So I knew there was a chance I could get it.
Hit you early.
Yeah. So I think it truthfully in my family probably came early, but people didn't associate it as maybe thought it was more of just getting older and normal vision loss. So I was able to avoid a medical board for the year I deployed and 1 year in brigade command. And then my second year in brigade command, they initiated another medical board. The board went away when I sent back to Walter Reed, got some more testing. They said I can still do my job. But once I came back to the States and was assigned to Fort Knox, Kentucky, to U.S. Army Human Resources Command, where I was a Chief of Officer Readiness Division, so 90,000 active duty officers in the Army. We move a third of them every year. So my division, amongst other things, also identified what positions in the Army we were going to fill, because you don't have enough by grade and specialty to fill them all. So you have to make that choice. So, but they started another board on me, and at that point I started to realize I can't do the soldier thing anymore. I'd already been restricted, no night driving, and I was actually ready to go. Because you can't be on active duty with this condition. Nobody on active duty, medically wise, is experienced to treat, or not even treat, to at least have that conversation with. There's no treatment. It's more about getting mobility training. And the only place that I need to get to the VA quickly, because then they have the resources available to me. So I didn't fight it, but it was, the medical board started again in like the summer of 2019, and by January I was gone. So it was quick. And I'll be honest, I was very disgruntled at that point. And I was like, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to take a break for a little while. And it was interesting. A month after my retirement was complete, I saw a job posting as a contractor working for the Department of Labor. They're looking for someone to help with the transition program to help service members find employment, meaningful employment.
Wow.
And like we were talking previously about having a sense of purpose. You know, you have this 25 years of service and purpose, and then it goes. And so you lose part of your identity, and you're like, who am I now, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this was good. Like this, and I applied for that job. They didn't hire me for that one, but because I applied, they saw this other thing. They made me the project lead for this program, pilot program. And so I got hired. And my wife's like, well, aren't you lucky? You apply for one job when you get out and you get hired right away. I'm like, I don't know. So I did that for a year. I worked with the Department of Labor and setting it up. And now it's gone from a pilot. It's a full-fledged program. I'm not on that contract anymore. But again, it was about something I could do, and it wasn't about the money. You know, I told the person hiring me, I don't need to work, but if I'm going to work, I want something to be helping others and be fulfilling for me. And what better way to honor the military is to give a transitioning service member and their family a job. I don't think most people don't realize how stressful that is, because companies don't hire 6 months out, but you're supposed to start your transition planning a year out. And so what do you tell the moving company where to send my stuff if you don't know where you're going to end up?
Exactly.
How can you sign your kids up for school and programs and all that if you don't know where you're going to be? So it's very stressful.
You don't know where you're going, what you're doing.
No. And some of our conversations with employers is, can you try to commit to hiring somebody 6 months out? Because I guarantee you're going to be pleased with the employee you get. And then managing expectations for service members that you're probably going to have to take a little bit of a pay cut. You know, statistically, that's true. But statistically, veterans tend to get promoted in their businesses faster because they demonstrate that they have the qualities that make for a really good employee.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, wasn't planning on doing anything. Then all of a sudden started working, and I enjoyed it, but left after a year, and have been doing community and volunteer service ever since.
That's great.
Yeah,
That is rewarding.
it is. Almost feels like a full-time job.
I know what you mean. So you adjusted to civilian life pretty well.
That I would say no.
Okay.
You get the illusion. It's almost like fake it till you make it.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the transition is rough. I mean, so you're surrounded, and I'm generalizing, people who, especially if they've made it past their first enlistment, they and their family is what keeps you, just like in my case, all types of reasons why you initially raise your right hand, but why do you continue to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because your family supports you, and they appreciate the sacrifice and the life you're leading right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that people then are there for all the right reasons. And it wasn't just for paying off college, or when you leave that and you get out into the civilian world where there's, not a language, we're acronym heavy in the military, right? And you're trying to speak in terms now that people understand, back to the towed howitzer.
Yes.
And you've got to learn that. So that's struggling. And let's be honest, businesses are in the business of making money.
Exactly.
I was never in the business of making money.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the business of making an impact and having an effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's hard when you see the motivation isn't always aligned with what motivates you as a person. That's why I today do more nonprofit, not governmental work. I'm not seeking things that are in their normal corporate structure,
Mm-hmm.
because I can't get on board with doing things just to make a buck. No matter what you produce or service you provide, at the end you still are driven by the almighty dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard. I mean, I feel like, and I'm sure many in the same boat, we're still in transition. We still haven't adjusted and may not fully adjust based off our experience.
I can understand that. I really do understand that. So what would be the suggestion with transitioning soldiers, and how do you fix that?
I don't know if I have the solution, but I would encourage those who are transitioning, whether it's your initial term, 3 to 4 year enlistment, or it's 30 years in. Once you find what your passion is going to be next, location, there are programs out there right now that provide sponsorship. So we were okay. While I was on active duty of moving from base to base, and your gaining unit was supposed to sign us a sponsor who could give you advice on maybe where to live and what school districts, and maybe some ideas about employment, and pre-mass internet, that was hard, right? They would mail you apartment flyers and these types of things. Now the information is really at your fingertips, but the VA is partnered with and has a onward ops program where local community members, and you don't even have to have been a veteran, can sponsor a transitioning service member and their family and give them recommendations like that about schools and maybe employment opportunities. I mean, what a way, again, to thank and honor your veteran population by stepping up and doing that.
Mm-hmm. And
talking to them. Again, people, I think there's this belief only veterans can talk to veterans about their experiences, and no. It would benefit, I think, anyone to be able to talk to a veteran, and what a great thing to be able to sponsor them and give them advice on medical care, where they want to go, job opportunities, what maybe groups that they could join locally, both in a service capacity or a social capacity. I mean, and make that transition a little smoother, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not naive. Networking is huge when it comes to employment, so that's going to help in that possibility too.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I would actually like to see. I mean, veterans can offer themselves up, but I'd like to see more of members of the local community raise their hand, stand up, and say, "Hey, I'd like to chat with you and help you make your transition a little easier."
That is a great thought.
Again,
yes.
away for the country to pay back.
Mm-hmm.
And surely, I mean, sometimes I get a little disgruntled, to be honest with you, Cindy. Like, thank you for your services just become kind of automatic. It's like liking something on Facebook. It doesn't require any effort.
Kind of like a bumper sticker.
Yeah. And it's
Doesn't make me
PC,
mad,
right?
too.
Because you'll say it because it's expected to say it. And I'm not, sitting there as a veteran going, well, you need to do all these, give me free meals and all that stuff. I'm not interested in that. I think if you really want to thank veterans for their service, those are the types of things that really show that you care and you want to thank service members and their families, because we can't forget about the families. Again, that's what keeps us in uniform. If your family's not on board with you, you don't have that support structure, you are not going to re-enlist.
No. You're
not going to stay. And I applaud at least the Army, based on my perspective, they've pushed a little bit more and made it easier for spouses to find employment, to maintain, have states honor teaching and nursing certifications from one state to another. So when you move, you're not having to give up your career and your job completely and start over. So those are all different examples of how we honor and thank our service members for what they do.
That's right. You don't go to reunions or anything with your other units that you were involved with, but
I haven't. So the 82nd Airborne Division every year does what they call All-American Week. And if you're a paratrooper there, you're doing sporting activities, unit competitions. There's a big division run. It's very impressive to see about 18,000 paratroopers in formation running down the road. But they invite all the associations back. So I'm a member of the local chapter of the 82nd Airborne Division Association. So those veterans will go and interact and have, the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which I belong to, the two battalions there, the 1st and 2nd Battalion of 508th. So the veterans and the service members and families can interact. They do those types of things. I haven't been to one of those yet. There's almost like this feeling that I shouldn't go back to my equivalent of a class reunion until it's been an extended amount of time, So
probably been long.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, when I came in, there was still a very large World War II population.
Yeah, they're gone.
And
now it's Vietnam.
Yeah, and now it's the Vietnam
and they're
veterans.
going fast too.
Yeah, they are. So, I don't know. I may go back just to see one of those. I mean, I told some people I wouldn't go back until when they do the unit formation. So they have the division review. So they have the entire unit out in formation. I was proud enough as the Assistant Chief of Staff for Personnel, the adjutant, to be the guy that initially made the first commands. I get to tell 18,000 paratroopers, order them to fix bayonets. Sends chills down my spine. My wife, everyone was like, "Oh, you got to run out there. You're mic'd up. It's this whole big deal." And she's like, "Don't hear him complain. He loved every minute of it." I did. I mean, it's a great honor to do that. But they would have a portion in the review as the formations go by that the old timers would come by, and they're in wheelchairs, walkers, but just the ability to come in front of that huge crowd to say thank you. So I said, next time you'll see me at Fort Liberty, it'll probably be for one of those.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You didn't join any other veteran organizations, VFWs?
Oh, I'm like all over the place, like
Okay.
we talked before the podcast. So I am currently the judge advocate for Centerville VFW Post 9550.
Great.
I'm a member of Beaver Creek, Ohio American Legion. I am the National Society Sons of the American Revolution representative to the Dayton VA.
Wow.
I am the Veterans Committee Chair for the Richard Montgomery chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution. Next year, I will also be the ROTC, Junior ROTC Committee Chair. I have a lot on my plate, but what connects them all is veteran and disability advocacy and inclusion advocacy. So they may be all different, but I can see the connections
Sure.
of each and every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, they're not distinct. They're all very much connected, and so it's not as burdening as maybe it would perceive when I list everything I am involved with. So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah,
That is great.
Like I said, my new purpose gets me out of bed every day.
What would you like people to remember from your story?
If you want to honor our veterans, truly honor them. Deeds, not words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like we talked about the civil military divide, because so few people in this country have personal firsthand experience, whether in uniform as a spouse or as a child who's watched their parent leave for not days, months, if not years at a time. Find ways that you can truly honor them. Make a donation to, like in my case, this year, both with the Sons of the American Revolution, I led the effort, and in the VFW, to generate winter clothing donations to take out to the community living centers out at the Dayton VA. One felt proud to be able to do it, but we're having an impact because, something so simple as a new pair of socks.
Yeah.
Means a lot. I mean, and that, again, that effort shows you care and you want to honor them way more than just saying thank you for your service.
Or putting a bumper sticker on your car.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate you coming in and talking to me and our audience. And
no, thank you, Cindy. This has been fantastic. Appreciate everything you're doing within Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. This is a great forum, and hopefully we'll get some more guests to come on in.
Oh, I've got some lined up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.